You're listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing great. So I took a picture of the tagline for the Oktane 22 conference where we are today. It was "Identity belongs to you." I posted it to LinkedIn, asked people what it meant to them. I'm hoping that folks can think about that and maybe add a comment to that post.
Yeah, that is definitely the tagline for here. We are at Oktane 22. Definitely want to give a shout out to Okta. Definitely hooking us up with this nice little room that we're in. We've got some folks in here that we're going to get to in a second, but shout out to Okta team for helping us out, and definitely obviously for RSM for funding the travel. So with that little bit of blurb out of the way, let's get to our guests in the room. We've got Eugenio Pace. He's the president of Customer Identity at Okta, and Shiv Ramji, who's the chief product officer at Customer Identity at Okta. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with Shiv. One of the things we always like to find out is the identity origin story. So how did you get into the identity world? Is it something that you chose, or did it choose you? And we'll start with you, Shiv, and then we'll go to Eugenio.
I mean, I certainly didn't choose identity, that's for sure. And I think I accidentally ended up in the identity world. So started about, 15, 16, 17 years ago, started as an engineer. And my first project that I worked on as an engineer was to build a single sign-on portal. Kind of what we take for granted and we get out of the box today from Okta was not the case. So at the time I was working for Nielsen, this is a TV ratings company. So I built the first single sign-on portal for the field operations team. And so I had first-hand knowledge of building something like that. And so that's the origin. But over the years, I've just been a downstream consumer of identity information or identity data, whether it was marketing, advertising, cloud computing. And then about 3 years ago, Eugenio and Matthias reached out and said, hey, we're building this thing to solve identity, and would love for you to join us on this journey. And I was like, yes, I know that problem, because I worked on it many, many years ago. So that really helped, and that's how I ended up here.
One of my best decisions, by the way.
Isn't it great when you find people just out in the world that just
absolutely.
fit right naturally in, and it's like, yes,
It
we've
makes
done
all
it.
the difference. Makes all the difference. For me, identity is also like a story of identity finding me and serendipity. I'm a developer, I'm an engineer as well. I was working for Microsoft, and Microsoft was working in what eventually became Microsoft Azure. And I was part of the Visual Studio team, and so tools and frameworks for developers. And my boss at that time said, you have to go and find anything that stands in the way for developers to build in the cloud. And it was like a new paradigm. And so I started doing research of how things are different. Like the network, the latency, the deployment, the infrastructure, everything is somewhat different. And I quickly realized that identity management was a big obstacle for building in the cloud or moving applications to the cloud. And so that was the start of the journey. And since then, here we are, Oktane 22.
So, and you mentioned Microsoft. We've had Vittorio Bertocci on our show multiple times. He's a friend of the program. I understand you guys wrote a book together, which is not something that I think we knew about until literally a couple minutes ago. So what was that about?
Yes. So actually, my very first conversation about identity was with Vittorio. And so I still remember Microsoft had this lab, Building 20, in the campus. And we had this, it was an amazing place where you can experiment with technology and brainstorm. And I have this vivid memory of having a massive whiteboard in the great Vittorio style, great artistic whiteboard. And he explained to me how modern identity works, and claims and federation, and how SAML worked, and WS Trust, and all these protocols it was an entire world that I didn't know about. So when I was discovering this challenge, we captured all the challenges in a little book that we co-authored. So the writers of the book was Vittorio, myself, Matthias, the other founder of Auth0, and a couple of other experts in the domain. And we published the book in 2009. It was like a little, very popular book, not the New York Times, bestseller list, but
Not yet. We'll fix that on the show.
well, it's still
It's available
around.
on Amazon,
It's still
I believe.
around. And so that was a big success in Microsoft because it captured it was concise and it was like a list of scenarios where identity was really difficult to implement. Single sign-on, APIs, and this and that. That was 2009.
So I got to ask, 2009, how much of that content do you think is still relevant today? Or has it changed completely that 30% of it is no longer valid, or is it less than that? Are there constants that were discovered?
Well, that's a great question because it ties into the timelessness of what we do. The solutions are different, and maybe we don't use WS Federation as much as we used it before. And maybe we make Okta, we make some of those things kind of irrelevant because it's no longer a concern, which is part of our goal, is to turn anybody in an expert without being an expert. But the concepts, the architecture are timeless. And it's like those concepts are I still send people, if you go and search on Stack Overflow, which every once in a while I spend a few minutes, going around, I still answer questions on identity and access management with chapters of the book. And you say chapter 1, we talk about claims and what do they mean. And
I got to tell you, that's the ultimate copy-paste answer. Right there. It's like, I've answered this question before. Yeah, just check out my book.
yes. Well, I'm not as in your face as that, but that's yes.
Yeah.
That's
He gets
yes.
2 cents per copy that gets sold, I'm sure.
Well, the book is free, by the way.
Okay.
You
It's
can
free?
download it from Microsoft still today, a PDF.
I'll find the link and I'll put it in our show notes so people can check it out.
But
That's great.
the 2009 book was a success. In 2011, we wrote another edition of the same book, which we creatively called same title, second edition, and it was double the size. And in fact, that was the epiphany for what eventually became Auth0.
I'm so interested in the origin stories, but we're here at the conference and so much is being announced and there's so much change going on, so much investment happening in the platform. What are some of the key announcements that came out in the conference this week that you guys are excited about that you want people to know about?
I'll tell you maybe the higher level of the product strategy that we're following, and maybe Shiv, you can go deeper into the specific capabilities. But the biggest announcement that we made is that we decided to tackle the market with two specialized offerings. And so one is the one that we call the Okta Workforce Identity Cloud, and the other one is what we're now calling the Okta Customer Identity Cloud, which is essentially powered by the technology that we built at Auth0. And so we have these two things which solve the same underlying problem, which is figuring out who is a user and who isn't, but in a way that it's tailored to different use cases, to different buyers, to different scenarios, and we are focused on solving those really, really well. So that's kind of like the bigger announcement, because there's the temptation to say, well, it's identity, it's authentication, it's the same thing let's have one thing that does everything. And it's like saying, we need a car. It needs wheels, it needs engines, it needs steering wheels and headlights. But, there's minivans and SUVs and sports cars and Formula One racing cars. They all have wheels, but they all have different purposes and they've been sold to different people. So here's the same concept.
So Shiv, same question to you.
Yeah, so I think going deeper into the customer identity announcements, I think some are obvious that I think your listeners and even you all have been following for the last few months. So we announced global support for passkeys, which will come in Q2 of 2023. I think this, again, advances our story of providing a passwordless experience. So I think that's really big and impacts all of us as consumers at the end of the day. We're also trying to solve for authentication in highly regulated industries. So think of utilities, healthcare, financial services. And so we've announced support for financial grade identity, which is a suite of features and products that are going to be released starting next year, beginning of Q2 of next year, and is essentially supporting a whole bunch of protocols that allows companies that operate in highly regulated industries to essentially work with our products because there's the extra layers of security and regulations that they have to adhere to. So that's like a big thing. It wouldn't be an identity conference or an identity announcement if it didn't include security, right? So security is a big focus throughout our stack, but specifically, and now we announced the availability of Security Center. The idea is basically, and a lot of our customers tell us, it's like, I love your product, so easy to use, so easy to get started, but like, how is my identity infrastructure doing vis-a-vis security? And of course, we initially said, hey, you can stream this information, whatever SecOps tool you're using, whether it's Datadog, Splunk, whatever. But a lot of them are like, can we just log into your dashboard and see what's going on with our implementation? And so it started from that idea that you can have a one-stop shop from an identity perspective, and you can get all the information that you need. So that's another big announcement.
That security center I saw yesterday in the presentation, Eugenio, that you were kind of leading. And I got to tell you, I'm a stickler for like little details, little flourishes. And for those who haven't seen it, this is going to tell you how much of a nerd I am. Just the way the chart dynamically updates and has like this subtle shift to the left over time. I mean, just chef's kiss. Like the design is fantastic. I would encourage people to go check it out. I'm sure there's videos out there and stuff like that. But I did sort of in there. It's like I noticed the little details on the design side of things. I was like, oh yeah, this is like if I were going to design something like that's the way I would want it to look. It's really well done. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So to really understand Customer Identity Cloud, I think you have to go back to kind of the origin story of Auth0. We'd love to get that. As Jeff mentioned, we've had Andres Aguilar on the podcast. We've had Vittorio, some kind of old school Auth0 people. But Eugenio, since we have you here, maybe you can kind of give us some of the history that made Auth0 and leading into now being part of Okta Customer Identity Cloud.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mentioned the book, right? We talked about the book, the second edition of the book. The second edition came in 2011, and as I mentioned, was double the size of the original one. And so I kept, I thought we can keep writing about this and hoping people will find the book. It's free, it's a PDF. Read the book, understand the book, copy-paste the code in the book into their own code, or we can just solve the problem. And so I applied for a job inside Microsoft to do this, to do what eventually became Auth0. And naturally, I did not get the job, which was probably one of the best gifts that Microsoft gave me, among many others. I'm really grateful to Microsoft in many, many ways. But in 2012, my wife, in her infinite wisdom, she said, like, well, you're going to die one day regretting not doing this. And it's worse to regret something than doing something, and if it doesn't work,
try it and fail. Right?
Yeah, at least you tried. And so she really gave me the final push to leave Microsoft, which was really great for me. I was really happy there. And in December of 2012, I gathered the last bit of courage. I resigned after 13 years at Microsoft, and I started Auth0 with Matthias, one of the other authors. I couldn't afford Vittorio, so we couldn't convince him to join right away. But that will take another couple of years, but we did it as well. And so we started the company with the goal of essentially saying, let's all the list of scenarios that you read in the book, let's have them as just like things that we ship out of the box. And so in March of 2013, we got our first customer, which I was in charge of sales at that time. Matthias was building stuff, and I was like
You're in
doing
charge of
else.
everything, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's how we split our responsibilities. And I had this, at that time, we had this like chatbot on the website, and everybody who joined there, I would reply instantaneously, and I knew a few things about identity, so I could provide like this great support and perspective. So everybody was very happy with free consulting. And this guy calls me on Skype and he'll say, I want to know how it works. And we did a little bit of pair programming and over Skype. And at the end of that, he said, like, I want to pay for this. How much? I have no clue how much to charge him and say, well, $50. And he said, oh, yeah, it's too much. I'm
Hold
starting.
on. $50.
$50 per
Okay.
month. Per month. It's recurring.
per month. Okay, right,
It's a
right.
subscription business. That I
There's
knew.
the foresight. Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. So we negotiated a little bit, and we ended up in $27 per month. Don't ask me how we ended up on that number, but we ended up on that number. And I was so happy, and I was ecstatic, that a couple months later we already had a paying customer. And my wife comes and say, what happened? I say, oh, we sold our first deal. We have a customer, a paying customer. And she asked,
How much?
how much?
Yeah.
And I said, $27 per month. And she said, you're going to need a lot of those. And she was
More
right.
gentle pushing.
Yes. She keeps me, accountable. But anyway, that was the start. And a couple months later, just to complete the story, also somewhat serendipitously, a friend of mine was working in a big company. He learned about what we're doing. He said, oh, this is actually exactly what we need here. And so that became our very first enterprise deal. And that was like hundreds of thousands of dollars, sorry. And so we had like the two data points, the developer working on his own, pay as you go, credit card, all the way to enterprise, CISO, security, procurement, on the other side of the spectrum. And by then we knew that we had something real, like we proved 1 point is a point, an anecdote, 2 data points is a line. And you already have like a function there. And then we decided to go all in and to grow the company and get investors. We bootstrapped the company for 1 year. We got investors. We hired Vittorio. We hired other people to help us, build what eventually became Auth0.
So cool.
And now you're part of Okta. I guess, tell me, how's that been going? It's been a couple of years now, I believe. Anything that people out there, can take away as fans, kind of like thinking about, okay, well, how has this actually been working? Like, it's turned into Customer Identity Cloud. What are lessons learned or things like that you'd want to share?
Well, our journey with Okta actually has a very long story because, in that year, in 2013, about a half year, in between the two deals, I got this call from random person that I didn't know, Todd McKinnon. And he introduced himself and said, I'm Todd, I'm founder of Okta. I really like what you're doing. I've been looking at the website and the content, and you should be working with us. And I say, yeah, well, that's very flattering, but we just started. I have one customer, or 1.5 customers. And so I declined even the consideration, but we remained in contact over years, over 10 years. And then we became friends, and we admired each other, and we solved the same problem, but for different people, for different audiences, in different ways. And naturally, over 10 years, that perspective on the market stayed. But what didn't change from the very beginning is that we had the same aspiration of what to build. And so, you heard Todd yesterday say, I always confuse like the two visions because they are almost the same. For Auth0 it was secure access for everyone, and in Okta is like provide access for everyone to safely use any technology.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same, and so coming together was really an opportunity of realizing that future faster. Because if we had gone our separate ways for 5 years longer, 10 years longer, we would have been like the true nemesis, like equal. But now we are an opportunity where we can combine forces and solve all these problems way faster than on our own.
As someone on the outside kind of looking in when this was happening, it struck me as how complementary the two organizations were. I think at that time, Okta was kind of known as the workforce identity company.
Right.
And Auth0 was very developer focused, which lent itself very well to the customer identity side.
Yep.
And when the news broke, it was like, well, yeah, no duh. It totally makes sense. Like, why not do that?
Yes.
So it was interesting, and to follow the journey and have had conversations with folks on both sides at this point kind of helps us kind of put that into context. So yeah, it's been interesting even just from outside. I'm sure there's great stories on the inside. We won't get anybody in trouble or try to put anyone in uncomfortable spots. But just as an observer from the outside in the space, it was just like I said, no duh.
Yeah, well, it was an unusual acquisition too, because you might think, oh well, it's a big company acquiring a small company, but we were not that small by then, and so we're not the 10 people startup. Okta was 3,000 people when the acquisition happened, and Auth0 was 1,000 people, and so it's kind of like similar. Of course, we were like a couple of years behind. We're not a public company. Revenue was smaller, obviously. But some of the challenges is like how it's a big maneuver. It's not like a small thing with a lot of people, with a lot of customers. And because we have customers that were using Auth0 for workforce, and Okta had customers using their technology for customer identity. So there's like these gray areas, and you can make it work. You guys are experiencing this. It's software. If you put enough effort on it, you can make it do whatever. It doesn't mean that it's the right technology for the right use case or the optimized use case. And so part of what we're going through in these 18 months, it's like figuring out our strengths and our capabilities, or where our technology complements and we can connect the dots. And yes, over time there will be a journey of not reinventing wheels that don't need to be reinventing. And so like an example that I always use is today we don't pay Amazon Auth0 for or customer identity and workforce identity. There's one bill, it's Okta. And that gives us economies of scale, not because we consume way more. And so we have a much bigger bill with Amazon, but it's one bill that it's more efficient than having two different bills.
Yep.
So just an update on how the acquisition's going. I mean, is it going as well as you would expect? I mean, everything we talked about so far has sounded very positive. Would you, and Shiv, question to you as well, how is that acquisition going?
Yeah, so I can start. I think one of the things that are going really, really well, honestly, is from the product team and the product and technology strategy that we have. We've sort of kept that intact, really. We've made no changes to the team or integrated the team. So why is that important or relevant? It really gives us the opportunity to continue to serve the customers that we wanted to serve. It gives the opportunity to accelerate some of the things that we wanted to accelerate. And it really allows us to enhance the reach in some of the markets that we wanted to get to. Like one example is that we were gonna build solving authorization in highly regulated industries, but probably would have taken baby steps to get there. But now being part of Okta with a global company, global sales force, we're kind of accelerated because those regulated industries and customers are Okta customers today. So kind of accelerates some of the market needs and the product needs that we had to do. And so like I think those are some really positive things. And then the other area that I wanted to also add, it gave us now we're in a place where we're thinking about what are the things we need to interop together, like what should be working well across both clouds. And so I think you will see over the next few years some really exciting things. Like one very simple example is Okta has this workflows has this workflows product that customers love. And we can easily connect it to the Customer Identity Cloud, and now customers get the benefit of two products that they love using.
So yeah, I've been in the customer IAM space for 20 years.
Yeah.
I've always felt like the authentication side was well solved. I felt like the identity management side of consumer kind of went back to the customer to do a lot of custom developed applications, like how do you want to let people register if you've got a delegated administration kind of scenario. Well, now with the workflows, you can let the customer solve that all within a low code, no code environment.
Exactly. And so I think there is a lot there, including security and risk signals, obviously. And if you had watched the keynote yesterday, we think we have something unique that we can do for SaaS builders or SaaS application builders, because we now represent both sides of the equation. So you can really accelerate a lot of capabilities and standards. And so we're just getting started with that. I'm just incredibly excited about what we can do in the future there.
Yeah, very cool. Also, technology like passkeys, and you announced FastPass here at the conference. Seems to me that that's not for customer or workforce. It's for wherever you want to use those things, right? So
yes, yeah. I think if you look at like passkeys, it really should work in any scenario across devices. But there is one difference, which is in a consumer use case, you really want this ubiquitous access across all devices, across different browsers. In a workforce scenario, it's similar. However, I think identity admins or CISOs or CIOs, they may want to have a little more control and policies over passkeys. So I think there is a subtle difference in how we implement it, but both clouds will be supporting it. And again, it really takes one of the surface areas for attacks, which is passwords, away, which is exciting.
So what's next in the customer identity space? I mean, you guys have been doing this for a while. What do you see coming up as, okay, passkeys are great. What's next? How are we going to make things easier, better, more secure, right? Everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, so I think we're watching a few trends, and I'll just talk about two. And one I'm more excited about. I think it has more legs than the other. But the first one is there is these decentralized technologies that are building, and so you hear a lot of noise and excitement, depending on who you ask, about Web3. So I think at the very least, we want to be a provider that bridges the two worlds, because I don't think we take a position of it's all Web 2, it's all Web 1 or Web 3. Frankly, the thing we are here to solve for is we're connecting so many different technologies and products. So it doesn't matter if it's Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. We want our technologies to work across all. So bridging those will be, we've already started doing some of this. A lot of experiments, so you can do like sign-in with Ethereum if you wanted. So that's one. The second one, I think there is still a bunch of identity data that's essential in physical formats and in silos. So we think that will be like the next wave. Think of your driver's license, your passport, your birth certificate, insurance cards. There's so much data that's still in a physical format for a good reason, by the way. If we can bring that online, and use verifiable credentials now that we all have devices with biometrics, I think that would be really amazing, and frankly, removes friction from our daily lives. Imagine not having to remove your insurance card every time you go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm noticing some of that improvement coming in small waves. I think an example that I've most recently had is the TSA. Going in to get through an airport, now you don't actually have to show your badge. I mean your ticket. They're just looking at your ID, and they're
actually last time I went through TSA, I didn't even have to show my ID. they had a camera set up and did a biometric of my face. Now I had to approve that from a privacy standpoint.
Yes.
But they were able to take my facial biometrics and map that back that I had a ticket for that day, and they let me right through.
I think it's very similar to like what Clear is doing, for example, and some of that
Yes.
stuff. But that idea of a digital verified credential or identity is a big part. I believe of the future. What I'm concerned about is the platforms playing along with that. You've got Android, you've got Apple. Historically, they don't really work well together, and trying to come up with something that works ends up having half measures on one or the other. So I'm excited about sort of the collaboration that's going on with FIDO, for example, where everyone's on board.
Correct.
I'd love to see a similar type of concept where, I'm a first-class citizen if I have a iPhone because I have, X capability versus an Android phone, which in the world is far more than Apple users coming up to that. And I think, is that something that concerns you as well, or am I thinking about it a little myopically?
No, we're. It's less of a concern. I think that this is exactly why Okta exists, actually, because we actually don't care what platform or stack you're on. We want to build a neutral and independent a cloud that essentially works across all platforms. And so you bring up a very good point. Okay, great. If all these innovations are on the iPhone, it works well if you're in the iPhone or Apple ecosystem. What happens if somebody in your family member is on Android and now they feel left out? So we want to make sure our technology works across platforms. And I think that's exactly the reason why Okta is the company to go solve a problem like this, because we care about all of these scenarios and we're not preferential to one platform or another. And we recognize that these platforms have their own reasons to do whatever they're doing, which is fine, whatever choices they make. And, we're big proponents of standards bodies where we can advance for the entire industry. And there'll be cases where if it's not moving as fast, well, we will go build some initial standards and try to get adoption. So I think, so I think our technology actually becomes even more relevant and even more powerful in a world where you have so much platform fragmentation. We see this in our work lives, by the way, every day. And so when this shifts to the consumer, same thing. We will try to solve it across platforms.
So we're gonna start to wrap things up because Magic Johnson is about to go on stage, and I think we all want to go see it.
We all want to see that.
Yeah. Mackenzie's in the corner; she's a silent participant here. She's got her thumbs up.
Lakers fan, I think.
Yeah. But we're gonna end on a lighter note, and I'll pose this question to Shiv first, and we'll kind of go around the room that way. If you could have any person, living person, for dinner, who would it be?
Yeah, so I'm a big Manchester United fan, which is English football. And so Sir Alex Ferguson, who was a coach for about 24 years there, I became a fan since he was a coach. And so I would just love to have an evening with him. I think there's a ton I could learn from the years that he spent coaching these amazing players and won, 19 different trophies.
Is there a first question that you would want to ask?
I'm just it's how do you manage all these egos?
Oh. Yeah. Eugenio, how about yourself?
Yeah, well, in the 10 years that we've been building Auth0 and now in my role here at Okta, I found another passion, of mine. So I'm an engineer. Of course, I love technology and all of that stuff, but eventually, I learned that my product in building the company was actually building teams as well. So very similar to what she was describing. Actually, not too long ago, I read a biography of a world leader that I admired a lot, and I liked her in being in a very difficult role. And I could see with all, of course, the differences in scale and complexity, I could see a lot of similarities of that. I became a geek of leadership and guiding people into greatness. And so she's Angela Merkel. I think she's a world-class leader and humble and, probably no joke, leading one of the biggest economies in the world in a complicated world. And so I would love to have dinner with her.
Yeah, no kidding. It was a very stable environment with her in charge. Jim, how about yourself? Who are you going to have over for
I've
dinner?
got an answer kind of like Shiv's. So it's a professional athlete. And I thought about it from the standpoint of somebody who I could learn from, right? Somebody who I'm kind of awestruck by, but also somebody I could potentially influence. And I chose Aaron Judge from the New York Yankees. I'm a big New York Yankees fan. The guy had a phenomenal season, and it was his quote-unquote walk year, which means that he's now a free agent and can sign with any team for as much money as they're willing to offer. But what I'd like to try to influence him to do is stay with the New York Yankees, as long as they're going to give him the money. So, yeah, that's my answer.
All right. Well, you guys have good answers. Mine is extremely specific. I want to have dinner with George R.R. Martin, author of Game of Thrones, and really ask him about season 8. Because I know that, I love all things Game of Thrones. I thought it was, I enjoyed it for what it was. To me, the series ended when Arya kills the Night King. Sorry, spoiler, right? It's probably put it out there. And the next couple of episodes were sort of very quickly trying to tie it up. And I want to know sort of what was the real ending here? Like, what's he thinking about? Because he is still writing the book years later.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it. So I'm curious, just from I want to close the loop on that one. So you guys give good answers. I got the stupid answer, but that's what I want to
That's
have.
a
Well,
good answer.
no, I
Good
think
one,
that's a good
too.
answer too. And it's probably like HBO said, all right, we need to wrap this thing up. One more season, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of wrap things up, let's go ahead and do that now. Thank you guys so much for being part of this. I know you guys are super busy. You have presenting and you've got a whole lot of demands on your time, so we definitely appreciate taking the step for us. And shout out to Mackenzie sitting across here for helping coordinate everything. And to the entire Okta team, right, being able to help us out and support us through this, as well as RSM. We are going to go ahead and leave it and go talk to Magic Johnson. You can find us on the web, identityatthecenter.com, or on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll talk with you all in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.